Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make two really easy bread recipes. The first is a really simple dough that you can turn into loaves, you can turn into bread rolls, dough balls. It's really up to you. The second is a treacle bread that doesn't need any yeast, so if you don't have yeast, this is a really good recipe for that, and it's really, really tasty. You can find the recipes in the link below. With all the measurements. I'm not going to go through all the measurements now, but they're in the recipes. Yeah, so let's start with the basic bread. All you need for bread is 5 ingredients. You need salt, sugar, yeast, water, and flour. So it's really easy to make. If you don't have yeast, you can turn them into flatbreads. That's no problem. I would just have the recipe, not add yeast, and you can roll them out and fry them, and you've got some nice flatbreads. So I've got my flour in a bowl, and I'm just going to add some salt. Salt's really important, it adds a lot of flavour. I'm just going to mix that in. In the jug, I've got warm water. Warm water is really important. You don't want it too hot because it'll kill the yeast, and you don't want it to be too cold because the yeast just won't activate and it won't rise. So into the water, I'm going to add my yeast. And I'm going to add some sugar. The sugar acts as a bit of flavour, but it also is food for the yeast and it helps it to grow even more. I'm just going to mix that together with a fork. The longer you leave the yeast in the water, you'll start to see bubbles form. That's the carbon dioxide that the yeast is producing. And that's what gives us the bubbles in the bread. So I'm just going to mix that together. Once it's all combined, it's really easy. Just chuck it in the flour. I'm going to add about half to the flour to start with. And then I'm going to bring it together with my fork. You can dive in straight away using your hands, but I find it's easier just to bring it together with a fork. It's less messy. So when it starts to combine, you can add the water again. I find it's always better to add a little bit at a time. You don't want to add too much. You can always add more, but it's really hard to take it out. So I would just add a little bit at a time. And you'll notice it'll start to get really stiff the more you mix it. The rest. And when it gets to a stage where you can't use your fork anymore, that's when you can get your hands in. So just bring that round. I find it easy to move the bowl when I'm doing it, as well as my hand. Just the last bit of water. And mix that round, and you can see it's starting to form the dough. So this is where we can lose the fork. We can add a bit of flour to our surface and flour our hands. Tip that onto your side. And then we can start to bring it together and knead. So to knead, you're going to use the palm of your hand and you're going to push out, and using your fingertips, you're going to bring it back in. You're going to push out with your palm of your hand and bring it in with your fingertips. You can start off slow and make sure you're bringing in all that flour that's on your bench. And then you can work up a bit of speed. Now the kneading is really important. It opens up the gluten in the flour, which gives it its springy texture and helps the dough to rise. So it's really important. If it starts to get a bit sticky, just add a little bit of flour. You don't want to add too much, because if you add too much flour, it'll start to go really stiff, and that's not something that we want from this dough. Now, you should knead it for about 5 minutes, but you know when it's done, when it starts to feel really smooth and it's got a bit of a shine to it, so you can see that the top's getting smooth, it's not rough, and it's not sticky. So you should do this for about 5 minutes. A little bit more flour. Okay, and then that's gone nice and smooth. You can see that, I hope. Bring that into a ball just by cupping your hands underneath and twisting it round. So you've got that into a ball. You then want to pop that into your floured bowl, okay? And pop a damp tea towel, a clean damp tea towel, just over the top. And you want to leave that in a warm place, ideally draft-free, for about an hour. Now, I've done one already, and hopefully you can see that that's doubled in size. So it's about an hour, hour and a half, or until doubled in size. And now it's puffed up, so you just want to knock it back. That's getting rid of that gas. You just want to take that out of the bowl and just give it a light knead, not too much. We're just bringing it back together and knocking some of that gas out, and you'll hear it go. Okay, it's nice and smooth. So now this can make 2 loaves. So we'll cut it in half. Okay. So with 1/2, I'm going to add it to a loaf tin. I've just lightly floured this tin. And I'm just going to shape it roughly to the size of the tin. Plonk it in. And with the other half, I thought it would be good to do some dough balls. So I've got a baking tray. If you don't have a loaf tin, you can use anything. You can use a frying pan, roll it out, put it in the frying pan, and we're going to let it prove again. So it doesn't matter if you don't have the equipment. So for the dough balls, we've got our dough. You can cut this in half again to make it easier to work with. And I'm just going to roll that out into a baguette shape. Then cut them evenly. With your dough balls on your surface, you're going to roll them out. As you roll them out, you want to bring your hand up. It cups your hand and it'll turn them into a nice ball. And we can add those to the baking tray. Do these nice and quick. So once you've filled your baking tray and you've got your loaf tin, you can make 2 loaves with this. You don't have to do the dough balls. I just thought I'd show you something different. We're going to put a damp tea towel over those again. Put them somewhere warm, and we're going to let them prove again. So that you want them to double in size again. That'll take about another hour. So while they're proving, I thought I'd show you the treacle bread. Now this is really easy. You get all of your ingredients. This one doesn't need strong white flour. It just needs plain flour and self-raising flour. So once you've got those, you plonk everything else into a bowl. So in here, the recipe says black treacle. I don't have black treacle, so I've used honey. You can use golden syrup as well. That's really good. You could use maple syrup. That's equally as good. And I've used some porridge oats as well. If you don't have those, you can use muesli, or you can just leave it out altogether. So you mix those ingredients in a bowl. And into there, you're just going to add your milk. This recipe works equally as well with any type of milk. You can use any type of flour. So if you're a celiac, you can use gluten-free flour. So we just mix this in. There's some bicarbonate of soda in here as well. That helps for the bread to rise. If you don't have that, you can use baking powder. And if you don't have either of those, you can just use the self-raising flour. I would just use self-raising flour and double up on that and take out the plain flour. So just mix that round with a fork. And I'll be honest, it doesn't look great. Okay, it's like sloppy porridge. But don't make the mistake of adding more flour if you think it's wrong. This is right. So you get another loaf tin. Again, you can do this on any baking tray, a frying pan, as long as they can go in the oven. So if they've got a metal handle, that's great. So into your loaf tin, I've just added some flour. I'm going to put some oats at the bottom just for added texture. And you literally just whack this in. It doesn't look the most appetizing, but trust me, it will taste great. Just scrape that all in. There's a bit of flour, you can just mix that around. Scrape that in. For this one, you don't want to fill it to the top, so you can see I've left a gap there. I'm just going to add some oats to the top of that. This adds a bit of texture and it makes it look a bit better. And I'm just going to drizzle it with some olive oil as well. Not too much, just adds a bit of flavour and it gives it a really nice golden finish. So once you've got that in there, you're going to put it in the oven, about 40 minutes. You'll see it rise up, go golden brown. The same with the bread. To know it's done, just lift it out. Be careful, it'll be hot, but tap the bottom of the bread. And if it's hollow, it's cooked. When you've got them out of the oven, let them cool. You can do that in the tin or on a wire rack if you've got one. That's great. What have I forgotten? Nothing, I think that's it. So if you do cook this recipe, send your pictures to the email address that's in the link below and enjoy cooking.